Welcome to America, the home of the free, where the school books don't talk about no people like me. And I still fit the description even with the degree. See, the fiction makes friction, we just feeling the heat. Yo, we take a seat where Rosa refused to park. We riot the same streets that Martin chose to march. I'm standing with my fist up, I will not grin and bear it. We're repeating history because we never share it. Today, we're changing that narrative. My name is Mr. Alexander for those that don't know me, and I'm one of the equity specialists for our district. We're doing each other no justice by sugarcoating history in hopes that we don't offend others. As a kid, my mom made me read a lot of historical books. She believed, and I believe, that if we're gonna make real, sustainable change, we have to understand where we come from, how our history impacts our current reality, and how we can come together to make things better in the future. This weekend, we celebrate Juneteenth. While this holiday may be new to some, it's been celebrated in some Black communities since 1866. To understand the significance of Juneteenth, I'm going to share some facts and perspectives that we don't talk about in our history books. In 1776, our founding fathers signed the Declaration of Independence, marking the United States' freedom and independence from British rule. They wrote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by the Creator certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Yet at the time these words were written, more than 500,000 Black Americans were enslaved. Those who were enslaved accounted for about 1/5 of the population in the American colonies. Most of them lived in the southern colonies, where enslaved people made up 40% of the population. They didn't benefit from those unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness that our country is founded on. They were the property of those who those rights were truly intended for. We have been taught that Abraham Lincoln freed those who were enslaved by signing the Emancipation Proclamation. What we aren't taught is that in 1862, President Lincoln gave a speech in which he said, "My paramount objective in this struggle is to save the Union, not either to save or destroy slavery. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that." When the Confederate States would not rejoin the Union, President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation in 1862, which would call for any enslaved person in the Confederate States only to be freed on January 1st, 1863. This did not apply to states which had remained loyal to the Union. Slavery was still legal in those states. In January of 1865, Congress passed the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, which would officially call for the end of slavery in the United States. This did not mean that all states immediately followed orders. 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, on June 19th, 1865, federal troops arrived in Galveston, Texas to take control of the state and ensure that all enslaved people were freed. This was when and why Juneteenth became a celebration. It is important that we understand that while June 19th, 1865 marked the end of one American struggle, it sparked another. Being legally free was not the same as being for real free. In 1865, Southern states instituted what were called Black Codes. These codes were a set of laws intended to keep a steady supply of cheap labor and to reinforce the perceived inferiority of enslaved people who had been freed. An example of Black Codes were the vagrancy laws enacted in Mississippi in 1865. These laws stated that any Black person who was unemployed and did not have a permanent residence could be defined as vagrant and is subjected to being arrested, fined, and bound for a term of labor if the fine couldn't be paid. So let me help you make this make sense. So people who were born into slavery, who knew nothing else but slavery, were now freed with nowhere to go and couldn't be hired for any kind of work. So then they became vagrants, which was then a crime, which could lead to them being arrested and fined, which because they couldn't pay the fines because they couldn't work, now they had to go back to the plantations and work for free. See, history is deep and complex. There's a lot of things interwoven in there. We have to do our research and learn for ourselves. On June 17, 2021, Juneteenth became a federal holiday and will be commemorated this weekend. For me, Juneteenth represents progress, and that alone is a reason to celebrate. I believe that we're at the best high school, in the best community, in the best country in the world. That doesn't mean that things are founded on a fairy tale. It means that we're doing the work to come together and to continuously make change. We've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. So we have to keep learning where we come from, to better understand why we celebrate where we are, and to continue to work towards where we're going.